Russian President Vladimir Putin is trying to change the conversation. So argue Adrian Karatnycky and Alexander J. Motyl, writing in Politico. It's their article that we'll look at today here on the Press Review. The two writers say that the Russian leader wants to alter the focus of the media and the international community from Moscow's aggression in the Donbas region in East Ukraine to the civil war in Syria and the terror threat from Islamic State, otherwise known as ISIL. The Kremlin recently started a campaign of airstrikes in Syria, apparently targeting the Islamic extremists. So, what's Russian President Putin trying to do? Karatnycky and Motyl say by upping the ante in Syria, he hopes to strike a grand bargain with Europe and the US. They agree to his terms for the Donbas in exchange for Russia's cooperation in the war against ISIL. Putin wants the West to believe that he is negotiating from a position of strength. In fact, his is a position of extreme weakness. So why is Putin's position weak? The Politico article argues that this is down to the fact that his policy in East Ukraine has failed. The region is economically devastated, and the resistance to the Russian invasion shown by Ukraine has been much greater than the Kremlin was expecting. With the foray into Syria, Putin is trying to deflect attention away from his failures in East Ukraine and give himself a bargaining chip with the West. But as Karatnycky and Motyl tell us, it's a losing bet. They write, not for the first time, Putin is wrong. In fact, the Syrian adventure weakens Russia's position, both by demonstrating that Putin's policy on Ukraine has reached a dead end and by recklessly embroiling Russia in a new major overseas commitment at a time of Russian economic decline. The two academics go on to argue that in the West, Russia's weak position has been misread. They say that pressure being put on Ukraine by France and Germany to take the next steps in implementing peace in East Ukraine is misguided. They write, regrettably, some European leaders are misreading Russia's weakened position and have called for a loosening of sanctions in response to the recent lull in fighting in Ukraine's east. Such a response would be a terribly inopportune signal to Putin, whose belligerence is encouraged by signs of weakness. So, in spite of calm in East Ukraine, the West must keep a firm hand on Russia and not relax sanctions, and must not push Ukraine to incorporate into its political space regions in the east of the country occupied by Russian-backed militants. If that means a frozen conflict in East Ukraine, so be it. Karatnycky and Motyl argue a frozen conflict in eastern Ukraine is preferable to deep concessions designed to force the West to accept an economically debilitating peace for Ukraine. With the new quagmire in Syria rapidly emerging, Putin is unlikely to add a major upsurge in fighting in Ukraine to the considerable risks he is taking in the Middle East. So, according to our commentators today, Russia's intervention in Syria is a bluff, designed to give Russian President Putin, among other things, a chance to exit from East Ukraine with his pride intact. The West shouldn't give him that opportunity, but it should instead see the current situation as an opportunity. Moscow is weak, and it's time for Brussels and Washington to press home their advantage. That's all we have time for today. Join us again tomorrow for another press review. In Kiev, this is Ukraine Today.